And we're back with more Talking Law TV, and we're here with Gene Brooks talking about lung injuries.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Gene. You're on a roll being the doctor.
That's right.
So tonight we're going to talk about lung injuries, and we thought we'd just start with a picture of the lungs and let you sort of go over what they do, and then I've got some other
yeah, this is a really good picture, and this is probably the most helpful one. As you can see, the trachea, which would be the windpipe, going down into the lungs, and then the windpipe divides into the two bronchi, into the right and left lungs, and then it keeps dividing on down until at the very bottom you have the alveoli, which are these little grape-like things at the ends of the very ends of the tube, and that is where the blood exchanges carbon monoxide with oxygen, and that's where it gathers the oxygen. And yeah, and this is where it is. That's where the action is really at these smallest parts of the lung that are very thin, and that's where the gas exchange takes place.
And then, of course, they look like something in an aquarium here, but it's...
yeah, that's just where you've taken the lobes out, and yeah, that's very end of the lungs.
And then we have an example here of a healthy pair and a smoker's pair.
Yeah, and obviously you can see that this, you got the alveoli are inside there, and the alveoli, as you saw those little grape structures in the healthy lung are thin and have the elasticity to exchange the gas, and the one in the smoker's lung are probably fibrotic, or they've become thickened and scarred, and so you don't have as much of the gas exchange.
Now, when it turns black like that, is that the actual tar or nicotine that's clogging it up?
Well, I'm not that sure about with the smoker's lung. Very well could be. There is a topic, or there is a lung called black lung, which is coal miner's lung, where you actually get the coal dust in there, and it's one of the pneumoconioses, which are a type of the dust lung diseases you can get.
And right, and in the South, we had brown lung from cotton mills.
That's right. That's bisonosis, and that's from the cotton dust that gets in there. We've also had a lot of asbestosis, which some people call it white lung, where the fibers of asbestos get into the lungs, and they get down into the little alveoli that we talked about earlier, and that's where the scarring occurs there.
And you really cut your teeth on that sort of litigation when you were first starting your practice, didn't you?
That's right. For the first 2 or 3 years, that's all we did was asbestos work.
Is that pretty much over now?
Well, there's still asbestos claims. We're still processing them, and most of them are going through settlement procedures where you submit the settlements, and it goes through the process. There's an exception that in mesothelioma cases, we're still working the mesothelioma cases, and those some of those you have to go through settlement, but some of those you can, if you can find a viable defendant, you can still bring the claims.
Okay.
Alan, can you go back to the first?
I will in a moment.
Okay.
I have a quick question about drugs. Can drugs injure your lungs? Because I know you do a lot of tort work on pharmaceutical recalls and banned drugs. Drugs
so much aren't associated with lung injuries. They're more associated with the brain injuries, more systemic type stuff. There's one exception to that, and that's the fen-phen craze. They not so much to the actual lung itself, but to the pulmonary artery, which would bring the hydrogen or the oxygenated blood back to the heart where it would be pumped out. It called something called primary pulmonary hypertension, where that artery was closed off by the drug. It was a weight-reducing drug. Fen-phen, and Pondamin was the name of it. Pondamin and Redux were the names of those drugs. And so those caused that type of lung injury, but it wasn't exactly a lung scarring. Most of the lung injuries are caused by inhalation.
Did it make you short of breath, is what it did? Or just reduce your capacity in general forever?
When you primary pulmonary hypertension, it began having shortness. It was fatal. It was always fatal. It would... once you contracted it, you could live, I don't know, 3 to 4 years maybe, but it was, in the end, you would suffocate.
And those were recalled, what, 10 years ago?
Yes, they were taken off the market about 10 years ago.
And so if you're still here and you took it, then you're going to be fine.
Well, they found that there's quite there's a latency period. And we've represented those folks who had, I think this lady had last taken it 5 years before she was diagnosed. And so I don't know if they're beyond the latency period of that yet or not.
Was there a statute of limitations on going after damages, or?
Well, in a product liability case, the statute of limitations is 2 years from the date that you discover the injury. So if you discover the injury, then you have 2 years from that time.
Okay.
And there's a latency period, for instance, with asbestosis cases and mesothelioma cases. Often, those diseases don't occur until 30, sometimes 40 years after the exposure.
Okay. And we have your diagram back if you wanted to.
Yeah, okay, this is helpful. And maybe go through some of the different types of lung disease. The trachea is not typically injured, but when you get down to the bronchi, the right or left, the main air tubes, those can be injured when somebody develops asthma. And that can occur through a chemical exposure with something called, sometimes it's diagnosed as reactive airways disease, where the bronchi are irritated by a chemical. And typically, any chemical that is an irritant, if you have a large enough exposure, can irritate those tissues of the bronchi so that any time you're exposed to an irritant later, they will start to close up. Because asthma is basically when the bronchi, which are those air tubes inside the lungs, begin to close up. And the treatment is you have to take some bronchodilators or steroids to try to open up those airways. So
that's like the purple thing that you suck on, I forgot the name of it.
Or they're nebulizers. You can get which really send the agents down into the lung to try to open up the constriction.
It's like a pressurized inhaler,
yeah,
just to blow it down in there.
You blow it down in there. And there are tests that people give. For instance, a methacholine challenge test, where if a doctor, they're usually given for medical legal reasons when you're trying to prove causation or the extent of injury, such as if where people are actually exposed to an irritant called methacholine, and if it causes the bronchi to close up, then they will give this nebulizer treatment to open it up. Of course, that's all done in the hospital, so it's done under safe circumstances. Yeah. Don't do that at home.
In the last few years, we've talked about the prevalence of black mold, Chinese wallboard, etc. Is all of this really leading to lung injuries? Is that where the damages come from?
Yeah, it can, because both molds and the Chinese wallboard, those would be hydrogen sulfide fumes, those can be irritating. Anything that's irritating to your eyes or your nose, if you inhale it, it can be irritating to your bronchi. And if you get enough of it, then it's going to cause this irritant reaction, the reactive airways disease. Now, the interesting thing is everybody reacts at a different level. Now, for instance, here in Savannah, a lot of the hydrogen sulfide has been taken out of the air by the scrubbers that we used to have. But there was a good deal, and still may be, reacts like sinus conditions, respiratory conditions. Also, certain allergens can be irritants, but not so much that you would have. An allergen and an irritant reaction are two different things. With an irritant reaction, you don't have allergens. You just have a very sensitive type of air passage with the bronchi. So that's why it's the chemical irritants that can cause that. And molds can cause it, certain types of molds.
Okay, well, thank you, Gene. If you think you've been injured and have any kind of lung injuries, then you can give Gene a call and contact him through our website at talkinglawtv.com. We'll be back with Brian Johnson, the city manager of Garden City, right after this.